Ba-da-ba-ba. There's my music for the start of this podcast. I really do need to record something. I don't know. I'll try to figure it out. Some nice little jingle. I like to write jingles as well. So, hey, welcome. You are now tuned into Epilepsy and Special Needs. This is a podcast, and this is your podcast host. My name is Yadita Span. And who am I in the first place? Why am I even here at this hour? It's about 6:59 here, Eastern Standard Time, coming on talking to you about epilepsy. Well, I'm a mom. I'm a caregiver of a brave daughter who was diagnosed with epilepsy. I am an author of a book entitled Don't Give Up, Acknowledging the Struggle, Celebrating Resilience. That is on Amazon. I'm also a faith coach, a faith-based coach, life coach, a mentor, purpose coach, pastoral caregiver, and also a motivational speaker. But I'm going to bring it down a bit as I speak to you on this podcast. I don't want to come out and start going, rah, come on, you can do this. No, that's not what this talk is about. You might want to tune into some of the other podcasts. There's another one called Pep Talk with Yadita and also Real Talk with Yadita. And I want to say Pep Talk is on Apple Podcasts and Google and Castbox and Spreaker and a couple of different ones. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk with you about epilepsy, this condition that touches many lives. How many? Well, we'll go into some stats. The other thing I want to say is sometimes we're not sure how many people around us have been touched with epilepsy, simply because, I kind of feel like it's hidden in the shadows, and I have a couple of reasons why I think that might be. You may or may not agree with me during this podcast, but always remember that these are the views of the podcast host. Some of the information, of course, is factual and it is statistics and all of that great stuff. But I want to say this before I start. So this is a live podcast. I do tape this podcast live. And what does that mean for you, the listener? So you may hear, I don't know, life happening. My daughter might be eating something and you might hear the plastic wrap going crinkle, crinkle. You might hear, I don't know, if a dog decides that it wants to bark. Or something, a car goes by. Why am I saying this? Because, when I think about the message, when I think about what we are passionate about, when I think about what we advocate for, and believe me, I am a woman of faith, and so I do believe in miracles and the power of healing, absolutely and positively. And so I don't negate the fact that I am trusting God and believing that He will do great and mighty things for my daughter and for the epilepsy population at large. It may, for some people, I realize that they've gone through some difficulties and, there is something called suit up and, it's hard sometimes to talk about that part. But I continue to believe that there's going to be a cure. I continue to believe that as we continue to push forward and to bring epilepsy out into the front, just like, and I get it, like I know sometimes people don't want to talk about diseases and things like that, but as we do talk about them, because people are affected, I believe there's a time for, when healing does happen for many people, and sometimes people are healed in different ways. But yes, I will always believe that God is a healer, but I want to say, this particular condition, I see it. Like I go on the pages sometimes and I look at, how people respond to epilepsy. I'm on the Epilepsy Foundation page and I looked the other day on LinkedIn and I said, how come more people are not commenting or liking or sharing some of the news that's happening on that page? And I don't want to get names wrong. I'll come back on, but you can look it up yourself. There are people who are being elected back into office and all of that great stuff. And, I like to congratulate because, it's good to congratulate people. We can, complain. It's good to congratulate and say, hey, great job and what have you. But I just feel like when it comes to epilepsy, because people really don't understand it, that it's somewhat like hidden in the shadows. And I feel like it's important for us to shine the light on it and to talk about it just like we would any other condition. Just as, people support any other condition, it's important to do that also with epilepsy because it's very real. And, I'm on, as I stated before, a number of pages on Facebook and groups and what have you, epilepsy for caregivers or parents of children with epilepsy, or the epilepsy page that they have there. And I see that there are so many people there that are fighting through it, pressing their way through it, even as difficult as it may seem. And I also get to look at some of the posts and just see the responses that some people have dealt with, what they have had to put up with, how they've had to kind of advocate and to speak up on behalf of their child or even on behalf of themselves. And so I wanted to kind of go back a little bit. And like I say, you're going to hear my papers. So just, act like if you were sitting in front of me. You hear some papers ruffling around. So I wanted to go back a little bit, though, because I realized that a lot of people really have no idea what epilepsy actually is. And if that's you, you are in for a treat because you are going to leave this podcast with some knowledge. I don't have all of the information, but I believe that a little bit of knowledge is better than none at all. So if we can just start somewhere, we're a whole lot better off than starting nowhere. How about that? Okay. First of all, most people would love to know, what is epilepsy? Have you ever wondered that if you're not sure? Like, what is it in the first place? So epilepsy is a disorder of the brain when some or all of the nerve cells in the brain begin to fire together. It's a wave of electrical energy that sweeps through the brain, and that's what causes the seizure. And we kind of spoke about this during the last podcast on this particular topic, where I equated it to kind of a lightning storm, right? So we see that bolt of lightning and it affects the atmosphere. It lights it up, right? When there's a lightning storm, when there's a thunderstorm, you see the lightning and people usually, like, your adrenaline kind of like, oh my gosh, should I run? Let me get away from this tree. Let me hurry up and get home. Whatever it is, but there's a reaction that comes from that lightning bolt, actually, just zigzagging in the sky. And so it's a lot like that, right? So we have no, we have no control over that lightning bolt, whether it's going to strike or not. The only information that we have sometimes is when the meteorologist says, hey, there's going to be a storm, a lightning storm, whatever it is, take shelter, take cover, or whatever it is. But what happens when that lightning storm is in the brain? And so it's this lightning storm that's actually happening all at the same time. It's not a regulated, the electrical energy is not, it's not regulated. So it's kind of like a whole lot of neurotransmitters kind of firing off all at the same time. And that's what causes the seizure. And that's why if you look at a person who is having that seizure, for a moment, it's almost as if they are not, cognizant, right, of what it is that may be happening. They are not basically, I almost want to say they're not basically there with you to be able to think, have a conversation, and, talk with you at that moment, all of those things. It's because they're having this private lightning storm that they have no control over that is firing off inside of their brain, right? And so epilepsy is a physical illness, not a mental illness. That's something that I wanted to share as well. And to all the people that have a mental illness, my you know, my heart, I just think about you as well. And I pray for you as well, just as I do for the epilepsy community. I pray for you practically daily, like constantly. I'm praying and thinking about you. But I want to say it's a physical illness and not a mental illness. And so, with that thought in mind, oftentimes people need to take their medication. The medication actually helps them from having breakthrough seizures or another seizure, because there are things that happen when people have seizures, right? There are things that happen with memory, and nothing is funny about that, right? When you look at people who are older sometimes, moving forward into different ages, no, it doesn't happen to everyone, but sometimes you will notice that they become forgetful. And for people who have dealt with that, you yourself know that you feel a little saddened because you want them to remember you. You want them to remember those precious moments with you. And sometimes with a person who has a seizure disorder, for a moment and sometimes longer, they do not remember, particularly after they have had the seizure. They usually want to actually fall asleep and kind of recuperate. And so I actually created a PowerPoint. I did this workshop a couple of times at, a few schools, and it was called Epilepsy, A Parent's Perspective. And so I pulled some things together from there and kind of printed this out so I could share with you. So why should we, not just me, we, you and me, why should we even raise awareness about epilepsy? Well, one reason is because it's common and commonly misunderstood. And so some of this information I also pull from the Epilepsy Foundation website, right? Because they have so much information. Why not go and learn if you want to learn about it? That's where I saw the stats, because it can affect anyone at any age. And that is something that I think it's really important for us to pay attention to, because I realize that sometimes there are people who are born, something happens and they're born with epilepsy from infancy. And then there are other people who develop infancy, maybe a toddler, maybe if it's child benign Rolandic seizure disorder, they develop epilepsy around school age, right? 5 or 6 years old. And so then there are other people who may have had head trauma, or sometimes if a baby has a very high fever, or not just a baby, a person, a child, a very high seizure, they can have a febrile seizure, right? And so all of these things come into play. I think that's why it's really important for me to talk about this, and for people who don't really understand it to listen so that they can gain some knowledge, so that they won't feel like, if, I like to say, heaven forbid, like I hope it doesn't happen because it's not any fun. But wouldn't you rather be prepared than not prepared? Wouldn't you rather say, hey, this woman was on there talking and, some of her words. So this, and let me tell you what this is. This is a mama who's a little tired right now. That's what that is. Okay. So, but mama doesn't care because mama needs to come on here and do this right now. But needless to say, it's just like, wouldn't you prefer if you could say, I have the knowledge, this woman was talking about it, I paid attention, I listened to some of the things that she said, so that if anything ever happens to someone or someone that you don't know, you're walking down the street, you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, and you're able to help, and you could say, wow, I'm so glad that I knew what to do in this situation. Wouldn't it be great if we as a community, we as a nation, we as people in the school setting, we as family took the time out to even pay attention to the things that do not directly affect us, so that we can just be a part of humankind and help? What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. All right. So as I said before, it can affect anyone at any age. They, people, because they know that I am an advocate, come to me sometimes and they say, guess what happened? Or, This happened to so and so's relative. They were, I don't know what, anywhere. Who knows? Getting on a plane or on a bus, who knows? Going somewhere. And all of a sudden, they had a seizure for the first time, right? And they can talk about how they felt. We have to spread awareness. This is